Did Saudi Arabia assassinate a prominent journalist in one of its own consulates here in Istanbul? So the building you see right behind me is the Saudi consulate here in Istanbul. Now, just over a week ago, on Tuesday the 2nd of October, a prominent journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, walked in through these doors to finalize his divorce papers. He wanted to get remarried and his fiancée, Khadija, was standing outside waiting for him, probably where I'm standing right now. She waited here for 3 hours and Jamal didn't come out. When she went inside and asked what was going on, she was told that he had already left, but he didn't. Not exactly. What would happen in the following days would widen into what's now become an international crisis. And everywhere around the world, activists, journalists, the Turkish police, as well as the US government are all asking the same thing. What happened to Jamal Khashoggi and what does Saudi have to do with it? This is a story that gets more complicated by the day, with a lot of moving parts. Everything we think we know because of unnamed sources within the Turkish police and the Turkish government. But here's the story so far. On Tuesday, 2 private planes flew from Riyadh to Istanbul, carrying 15 Saudi diplomats, including a number of high-profile intelligence personnel, as well as the country's head of forensics. One plane landed at 3 a.m. and its passengers checked into a hotel close to the consulate and then entered it shortly before Jamal Khashoggi was meant to arrive. He'd been there just a few days before, on Friday, and was told to come back at 1 p.m. on Tuesday. The diplomats knew this and they were waiting for him inside. His fiancée says he was worried for his safety, but figured there's no warrant for his arrest and he didn't think his disagreements with the Saudi government amounted to hate, grudges, or threats. He also didn't think anything would happen to him on Turkish soil. So she waited for him outside the building as he went in, but he never emerged. 2 hours later, 6 diplomat cars pulled out from the consulate, followed by 2 black vans with tinted windows. We're walking right now from the consulate to the consul's house, which is literally about 500 meters away. This is the consul's house right now. The diplomats, once they left in their 6 cars from the consulate, including those 2 black vans, they arrived here and they stayed here for 4 hours. At the same time, the 2nd private plane had arrived in Istanbul from Saudi Arabia, and the rest of those diplomats also came here. Within an hour, everybody had finished whatever they were doing here and left, and 1 plane left from here to Cairo, the 2nd one to Dubai, and both ended up back in Riyadh within 24 hours. Now, what happened at the consulate and what happened here at the consulate's house is what the investigation essentially is about. From the reports that we've heard, the police believe that Jamal Khashoggi's body was cut up using a hacksaw, that he was possibly injected with some sort of drug and suffered a drug overdose, which is how he died, and that they're also looking into whether or not they're going to come into this house and dig up the backyard to try and find his remains. While the Turkish police haven't yet been allowed to enter the consulate building in order to conduct forensic examinations, what we now know is that they have audio recordings and possibly video recordings from inside the consulate itself, which means they know exactly what happened, they know exactly where it happened, and they could know where the body is. But again, all of this information has come to us through leaks to the media. The Turkish government has yet to accuse Saudi Arabia officially of premeditated murder. The Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says he's following the case himself personally and has called on Saudi Arabia multiple times to release any proof they have that Jamal Khashoggi left their consulate alive. But it's unlikely Turkey is going to make any official moves until at least this investigation is over, but also until the conversations that are happening behind the scenes between Turkey and Saudi conclude, which means that for now, everyone's looking to Saudi's most powerful ally, the United States, for a response. And the pressure on them is mounting. Yesterday, a group of 22 senators triggered what's called the Global Magnitsky Act in US law, which gives the Trump administration 120 days to investigate what happened and forces them to impose sanctions on the Saudi government if what they find out is conclusive. But it's unlikely that Donald Trump will make any move that will sabotage the trade relations and arms relations between the 2 countries. Yesterday, when journalists asked him about it, here's what he said.
We don't like it, John. We don't like it, and we don't like it even a little bit. But as to whether or not we should stop $110 billion from being spent in this country, knowing they have 4 or 5 alternatives, 2 very good alternatives, that would not be acceptable to me.
The day after Jamal Khashoggi's disappearance, Saudi Arabia's de facto leader and crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, told a bunch of Bloomberg reporters that he was just as concerned as everybody else about Jamal's whereabouts and that he certainly had nothing to do with it. That's pretty much been the official line since. Saudi Arabia maintains that all of the reports are baseless and that they've sent their own team of investigators to help the Turks out. Last Saturday, they even invited Reuters journalists to their consulate and took them on a tour of the building to say, hey, there's nowhere he could be here. Not very convincing. But the stone-cold silence from the Saudi government is wearing thin with every new piece of evidence that's leaked to the media. All of it is mounting pressure on it to come clean, or at least provide evidence showing that none of what people say happened to Jamal actually happened. If Jamal Khashoggi left the consulate like they say he did, where's the CCTV camera footage to prove it? Well, they say the cameras weren't working that day. Well, why was there a 15-man hit squad that flew in from Riyadh that very same day and left less than 24 hours later? Saudi says that also didn't happen. If you look around me, there's media and journalists here from basically every prominent outlet in the world. And all of us are covering the story, and it's amazing that all of us are, given that no official confirmation of any of this has been given to us. Not by the Turkish government, not by the Saudi government certainly, but not by the US or anybody. All that we have to go on so far has been ununanimous leaks from official Turkish sources, close to the police, close to the investigation, close to the government. And that is what's led this major story. The last thing we found out was that 4 months ago, US intelligence intercepted conversations between Saudi officials talking about a plan from the very top of the Saudi royal family, ordering them to lure Jamal Khashoggi from his home in DC to Riyadh, where he would be detained. But why go through all of this? What's so special about this one man? Jamal Khashoggi isn't your typical dissident. In fact, he doesn't actually describe himself as being against the government. He's very close to the royal family. He even once served as an advisor to their head of intelligence. He's a prominent journalist and a prominent public voice in the country. But as he became more prominent, he started getting pushback for criticizing the religious elite of the country, as well as its new leader's policies. Eventually, Jamal would flee the country in a self-imposed exile to DC and become one of its most respected critics. He applied for citizenship in the US and wrote a column for the Washington Post, and was said to be engaged to Hatice Cengiz, a Turkish woman living in Istanbul. All he needed to do was finalize his divorce papers with the Saudi government, and he was going to begin his new life. But there's also reports that something else was going on too. That Jamal Khashoggi was working to set up a pro-democracy NGO in the States to bring together prominent Arabs in exile from around the world and use the platform to challenge the authoritarian rule of some of the leaders in the Middle East and promote the principles of the Arab Spring. Something Saudi Arabia really doesn't like, and something that Mohammed bin Salman would have seen as a direct challenge to his rule. In the months leading up to his disappearance, Khashoggi started receiving offers from the Saudi government to come home. They even offered him a high-paying government role, but he told his friends that he didn't buy it, that he no longer trusted his government. A year ago, almost to the day, he wrote a column in the Washington Post explaining why he had chosen to exile himself from the country he loved. He describes a government that was becoming more repressive than he had ever seen before, the dozens of his friends that were being arrested, and an environment where public intellectuals and religious leaders were being silenced and shamed. He ended his piece like this: "It was painful for me several years ago when several friends were arrested. I said nothing. I didn't want to lose my job or my freedom. I worried about my family. I have made a different choice now. I've left my home, my family and my job, and I'm raising my voice. To do otherwise would betray those who languish in prison. I can speak when so many cannot. I want you to know that Saudi Arabia has not always been as it is now. We Saudis deserve better." If all the reports we've heard so far are true, and they almost certainly are, then this marks a point of no return for the new Saudi leader. It means all the work that he's been doing to try and prove to the world that his country is reforming, becoming more liberal, and becoming more open are wrong. It means no critic of him or his kingdom are safe, and neither is any other Arab dissident or journalist who speaks up, many of whom live here in Istanbul and now are fearing for their lives. It's not the first time that Arab regimes, including Saudi, have gone after dissidents abroad, but it's never been like this. Not in a government building in broad daylight and on foreign soil. This is different, and it's chilling. Maybe the most appropriate way to end this is with the words of his fiancée, Hatice Cengiz, who wrote an op-ed earlier this week saying the following: "Although my hope slowly fades away each passing day, I remain confident that Jamal is still alive. Perhaps I'm simply trying to hide from the thought that I have lost a great man whose love I had earned. As an individual who believes that life and death are in the hands of God, I pray to God alone for Jamal's safe return." This is Buzz.